it is the purpose of the projects and also the research in general. We are closing up this event with a very interesting topic that we as researchers always aim, which is to discuss on how we can transform our research into the actions. And with me, we have four very experienced panelists who we hope that will keep you awake, having in mind that we have had a very intense day, and therefore we hope that you will be engaged throughout the discussions. We will be hoping that our panel have less panelists compared to what we had until now. So we hope that we will hear also a lot from the audience, both with questions, but if there are some comments that they want to do, we welcome them. We will start with a small introduction of the panelists. With me, we have Anna Di Marchi, Information Officer in the Directorate General for Communication Networks, Content and Technology, or how we know DJ Connect, working on digital policy, innovation and online regulation within the European Commission with a background in international security and political communication. Here we have also Becky Slack from Agenda, a senior figure and researcher and advocacy organization focusing on social media and digital policy issues. She works on translating evidence into policy insight and public engagement around media harness and social impact. She also attended our roundtable with journalists. Here with me we have also Juliane von Reppert-Bismarck, founder and executive director of Lie Detectors, an award-winning media literacy initiative working with professional journalists to improve critical media literacy among young people and teachers. She leads the organization's strategy and has advised EU institutions on digital literacy, discrimination, and media pluralism. And last, we have also Saman Nazari, expert at Alliance for Europe, a coalition focused on strengthening European democracy, resilience, digital policy, and civic engagements. His work centers on research and advocacy related to digital threats, disinformation, radicalization, and cross-sector collaboration for democratic protection. I will start the discussion with Anna. Please, Anna.
Okay, can you hear me now? Very strong. Okay, so with me the honor of starting this, I hope I can give also the rest of the panel justice. As mentioned, I work on the DSA enforcement, the Digital Services Act. So maybe I'll just start with a brief summary of what that is and what we're doing, and then maybe we can go into the details on how it relates to today's topic. So the Digital Services Act sets EU-wide rules for transparency and accountability of online platforms. There are different types of areas where there are very important provisions. On one side, we have transparency, so transparency reporting, data access for researchers. We'll get later into what this means. And there are then obligations for that give a user more rights, such as the reporting of illegal content, but also opportunities to appeal and redress options, and then out-of-court settlement bodies. And then finally, maybe that is what's more interesting for today, is the risk management framework that the DSA sets on platforms. So the obligation for very large online platforms, so platforms that have more than 45 million users, to identify risks and mitigate them adequately. So the risk areas are defined in the legal text. Those are dissemination of illegal content, negative effects on civic discourse and electoral processes, and then we have also gender-based violence and physical and mental well-being, protection of minors, public health. There's quite a lot of wide range. And through this risk assessment and risk management framework, we can really enter a dialogue with platforms on what they see, what they have identified, and how they can best mitigate it. And we also have not so far shied away from opening investigations in case we have suspicions that this risk management is not done properly. So I think a brief summary is that we have opened about 15 investigations so far, mostly actually concern the risk management framework. The current cases are open, I think, against X, Meta, TikTok, AliExpress, Temu. I think we have quite a wide variety of marketplaces, social media platforms, and we look at different risk areas. So for example, I think I can mention the opening we had last week against X in relation to gender-based violence and the role played by the Grok functionality in this risk management and risk profile. On the other provisions that are also in place, we have been pursuing strong enforcement as well, like on the notice and action mechanism, and we also had some suspicions that the platforms were not doing enough to respond to users' claims that some content was not meant to be on the platforms. And there we're trying to not only ensure that there's a swift response to those notices, but also that the way that users can report content is easy, accessible for everyone, and accessible for also not only for users on the platform, but also from outside of the platform. So this is somehow like a general summary of what the DSA does and how it is. We have designated a number of platforms, and we continue to do so. We designated WhatsApp last week. And for those that are not designated, then the member states are have the responsibility to enforce this legislation. So we work really closely with the member state through what we call the European Board for Digital Services to ensure that we have a consistent and comprehensive enforcement across all platforms. I think here it's very important, especially to highlight the role of member states, because platforms that are not very large are also usually the platforms where online content, online crimes, illegal content, but also content that is harmful and leads to radicalization really thrives, because there's a risk for filter bubbles and rabbit holes that we're also investigating together with member states on how we can best tackle those. So I think that's on the DSA side, and this is complemented by other tools that are either suggested in the DSA or generally done by the Commission through other tools. I think worth mentioning is the Code of Conduct on Disinformation and the Code of Conduct on Hate Speech, where platforms and signatories commit to a number of KPIs yearly, and we have a monitoring exercise to understand how these areas evolve and how platforms respond. And we have, of course, trusted flaggers that are very, very important for us, as they are expert in content, especially in some member states. So trusted flagger in each member state can flag content to platforms, and they have a priority channel to do so. I think as the Commission, we try to set horizontal rules, but are very aware that there are a lot of regional and linguistic specificities in the EU that we cannot always capture, and this is where the member states and the civil society at member state level has a very important role, especially when it comes to language that evolves really quickly, like the one related to illegal content and hate specifically. And then, of course, we have, as mentioned earlier, the data access provisions, which is something that was very important for us to include in this legislation, and then we're trying to build on, so to really give as much power as possible to academics and researchers to have the data to conduct studies that then can come back to us to inform our enforcement. And that's it took a while to set this in place, and now I think with the Delegated Act, it's fully now in the hands of the member states and on the platforms to ensure that they provide the required access under the legislation. And when not done, we're also not shying away from opening proceedings against that. Finally, a word also on the Democracy Shield, something that is new, was announced last year to build on some of these measures, and we are working really closely together to ensure that this is not only about disinformation and electoral processes, as mentioned earlier. Also, this is not only about what happens around elections, but across. And this has different pillars, so not only around election, but also about education, about times of crisis that is not only related to elections, and around also not only informing and educating citizens, but also informing and educating platforms on how we can best work together to avoid filter bubbles and rabbit holes that end up radicalizing not only minors but also adults. And finally, one word I can say is that I don't know if we're aware that there is a board report that is published every year under the DSA, where the member states come together with civil society to flag what are the risks that are emerging, what is the online landscape like? What do we see is emerging as something that could potentially evolve into very dangerous situations? And the board report was published, I think, last November, and it does specifically mention the risk of radicalization, of violent extremism, of these bubbles to be created online, and it was quite a strong voice also from researchers in mentioning how there's not enough mitigation measures for this. So we have looked and are looking closely at how the risk assessment from platforms address this, and we're now trying to convene different parts of also our DGs, our services, to understand how to act and how to ensure that we don't only look at illegal content, but also at whatever is before that leads to illegal content, and offline violence, which is also something that we have quite on our radar, how we can prevent offline violence by looking at the online dimension first. A lot of information. I hope that was clear, and I think my colleagues, I'm sure here, will also complement and add very interesting angles, but for the moment, I can close.
Thank you very much for your contribution. We continue with Becky talking about why fact-checkers and media literacy interventions can fail to reach or pursue middle-aged audience, and how public communication strategies can be adapted to reduce vulnerabilities to online manipulation without further polarizing this group.
Thank you. So I should probably explain why I'm up here speaking alongside such an illustrious panel. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real honour. So my background is in journalism. I've edited and reported for the likes of The Guardian, The New Statesman, which is a left-leaning politics and current affairs magazine. I've worked for the BBC, various charity sector and business trade publications. I'm a judge for the British Journalism Awards, and I've written a book on effective media relations for charities. And these days I spend most of my time through Agenda, either advising on media strategies, in particular around crisis communications. A lot of these crises are driven by disinformation, deep fakes. So the content that we've had today has been super relevant for that part of my work. And then I also, the other side is taking academic research and insights and translating them into best practice that charities, trade unions, campaign groups, etc. can use within their communication strategies. So I'm coming at this very much from a communications point of view, and I hope to sort of complement all the other conversations. So thank you. So when we think about how to deal with disinformation online, obviously we have the regulatory side of things, which Anna is dealing with, and then quite often we think about fact-checking as being one of the other ways in which to tackle incorrect and deliberately manipulative information online. And it's absolutely essential. I would never say that it is not. My first job as a journalist was as a sub-editor. It was my job to fact-check content before it was published. So I fully support any fact-checking initiative that is out there. However, they have their limitations. People don't like to be told that they're wrong. or that what they think is bad or shameful in some way. And fact-checking can therefore sometimes come across potentially as a bit condescending and dismissive, which in turn can trigger defensiveness and then make people less likely, less willing to be open to new information and to changing their mind. Also, fact-checking doesn't address the fact that emotion trumps facts every time. And so content that speaks to emotions, whether it's fear or loss or anger or joy, all the stuff that we've been talking about today, how we feel about something quite often supersedes what we are told to be true. Also, there's an element of trust around fact-checking. During COVID in particular, I had lots of conversations with friends who were very suspicious about the fact-checkers that were out there, whether they were from vested interests, who was funding them, whether they were deliberately trying to manipulate them. So again, there's an element of kind of trust that needs to be taken into account. So what I'm going to share are 3 online tactics to support fact-checking, to accompany it. And they are around pre-bunking and how people process information. There's a little bit on trust-building language, which is about how messages land, and then something around who people trust. And so when it comes to pre-bunking, this is about getting ahead of the message. And it's something that is very commonplace within communications, particularly within crisis comms. If we know that there's a crisis brewing, one of the things that we will advise to our clients is get ahead, because the person who has the power is the person who controls the message and sets the frame and the tone and the narrative. It's much easier to address those concerns up front than it is to try and tackle perceptions and beliefs once they've already kind of been solidified in people's minds. So the idea of pre-bunking is that you try and shift interpretation before the beliefs have set. And that can take a variety of forms, from running content in advance saying, perhaps, you know, as an election appears or as this particular policy announcement is about to be made, you may hear stories that are suggesting that this information cannot be trusted. Think about why that information exists, what emotion they're trying to build up inside of you, and what the potential role of that is. In addition to helping that prevent certain narratives from landing, it can also help improve media literacy and people's understanding of how the media works. Just as an example, there was a Fox News story about the Alex Pretty murder the other day, where they were labelling him as an agitator, and all the protesters were agitators and radical. And so I kind of dissected the article on Facebook and kind of identify the different language that had been used and the role of those particular words. And my friends were all like, oh my God, we need more of this type of content, because it's really helped us understand how journalists choose particular words to try and convey particular perceptions and to help narratives land. So that's one example for you. Then around trust-building language. So people quite often, as we've heard today, part of the reason why they are drawn to disinformation, conspiracy theories and extremist narratives is because they feel unheard. There's stuff going on in their real lives that's making them feel a bit lost, perhaps, and they go online looking for answers. And so if, when we are trying to refute disinformation, we tell them that they're wrong, again, that's not going to land great. Telling somebody, you know, if somebody believes that the housing crisis, the reason that they can't get on the property ladder is due to migration, telling them that that's not the case isn't going to persuade them. What you need to do is meet them where they are, address their concerns, and then open it up and to help them understand the broader issues that are at play. That's about, you know, the focus here is about making sure that people feel heard. We know that this is why people turn to extremist and populist political parties, is because these parties claim to listen to them. And so that's also what we need to do as well. And then just thinking about the messenger, The messenger is quite often just as important and influential as the message itself. And again, we've kind of touched on this again today. I was actually really pleased listening to all the presentations because I was like, oh, I'm going to mention that briefly in my own presentation. So it's good that I'm on the same page. And thinking about who people trust, who people respect, and using their voices can be really, really helpful. Having a politician or somebody who's actively involved with the disinformation, trying to get them to refute something, people are just going to think, well, you would say that, right? Whereas if you get other people to act as advocates, then that can be super helpful. Just as an example, we were dealing with a crisis comms situation for a client a couple of years ago that was based on some disinformation that was flying around the internet, making some wild claim that was just very, very inaccurate and actually put people's lives at risk. And a very, an influencer, an online influencer with a really large following started sharing this, this disinformation and amplifying it. And rather than the organisation themselves asking them to take it down or trying to respond, what we did was we got advocates, so trusted voices from within that sector, to say, actually, this is not our experience of working with this organisation. We know that this isn't true. This is irresponsible of you to be sharing it. And it really helped take the wind out of it and prevent it from being shared even further. And then I'm just going to finish. I'd got a whole load of slides on this bit, but because we were focused on online and I've got limited time, I took them out. But I just want to say that I really believe that we can't act in isolation. We can't think about online on its own. We have to take into account offline strategies as well. Online extremism, as I've said here on the slides, it grows where journalism is weak, where community is thin and policy has failed. So we need to think about those aspects of our lives as well. And I'm just going to give you an example to end on. So I come from Derbyshire in the middle of England. And before Brexit, so it's a village in the middle of the countryside. And before Brexit, there were some plans to build a whole load of houses and a school and some healthcare facilities. And the council, the local authority, built the houses, but they didn't build the school and the healthcare facilities. At the same time, there was a group of Eastern Europeans that moved in, and local people also moved into these new houses, and the services that were there became really stretched. It was really difficult to get a doctor's appointment because all these houses had additional people living in them, and it was really difficult to get a school place, and the teachers were complaining that their classrooms were getting bigger and bigger. And rather than blame the local authority for not finishing the job and building the school and building the healthcare facilities, everybody blamed the Eastern Europeans. Now, the charities and arts groups and all those kind of civil society organisations, they were really stretched for funding at the time, so they were closing. They were the spaces where perhaps local people would have gone and met and interacted with Eastern Europeans, but because they'd been closed down, they didn't get the opportunity to do that. The media, the local media, again, really stretched, no resources, couldn't go out and do proper reporting on it, so picked up on discontent from X, Twitter at the time, and then started reporting on how the local people were blaming the immigrants. And so it just kind of reinforced this false narrative that migration was the reason why they couldn't get doctor's appointments and school places, when in fact it was the fact that the council hadn't built the services. And then Brexit happened, and they all voted for it, and now they're all probably going to vote for reform as well. So just if we're thinking about online extremism, then we also need to think about what is happening in the real world at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. Now I give the floor to Juliane, who will talk about insights from Lie Detector in-house data on differences in how teachers and students use digital media, as well as initiatives to build bridges between teachers, newsrooms, journalists, and governments to strengthen digital media literacy alongside the practical tools being developed and delivered across society. Please, Becky.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. And I'm so delighted to be sitting next to you, because you've actually done half my work for me. Because now that you've heard Becky speak, you will understand why Lie Detectors exist. It is for exactly these reasons. So I agree 100% with you on what you said on the need for pre-bunking. Rather than coming along and trying to debunk when it's too late, and people don't like being told that they were wrong, but neither do they want to be led up the garden path. And so when you get them when they're going up the garden path, that's when you can make a difference. So I'm going to speak a little bit about what we do, but then also really want to talk about the difference between the generational. I want to talk about the generational divide and what we can do with teachers to cross that digital divide and work with young people who, in some countries, can vote from the age of 16. So this is not just something theoretical, but it becomes very practically relevant very quickly. So just very briefly, just like Becky, I used to be a journalist. I was a journalist for 20 years, and very proud and happy to be doing this beautiful journalism that everybody should have been reading. And then along came Brexit and the first Trump victory, and I realized that we're all sitting in our little filter bubbles. We have no idea what's going on the other side. People lack the very basic skills of figuring out what's a bot, what's a troll, what's an Instagram joke, and what's an actual piece of news and fact-based reporting, that those skills are actually not that difficult to transmit, that journalists are probably the best people to transmit those skills because this is what they do all day long, and that we don't really have any time to waste in doing this. So we're a media literacy organization. We're very lucky to have very excellent core funding. So we've been working for 9 years now. We are journalist-driven, which means that we use the expertise of journalists to work with children and teachers to hand over very basic and practical journalistic tools of inquiry, and that includes fact-checking skills, so everybody can be their own journalist, their own fact-checker. Let's face it, that's what people do anyway. But that they should also understand how journalism works. It's very important to say that right from the beginning we decided not to take any money from the large platforms. They were actually the first to offer us funding. We realized very early on that that was not going to be a very good idea. And that has stood us in very good stead, because just like you were talking about trust building, we work with a very skeptical and very mistrustful audience, and they are teachers. Teachers don't trust anyone. And if you can say to them right from the get-go, it's true. They don't even trust their head teachers. If you can tell them that you're really actively avoiding taking any money from any political organization, from any large corporate organization, in particular the large online platforms, then you're already on your way to the door opening. And that's something that we keep working on. So we do, however, being headquartered here in Brussels, we do take a really active interest also in regulation. And we really see the problem of online disinformation, radicalization, extremism, polarization as something that needs to be tackled from two sides. And we call that supply and demand. Supply, those are, as much as we talk about FEMI and the hostile actors, etc., for us, supply means those who facilitate that information barreling around the world at breakneck speed, and that for us are the large online platforms. So we're very much about holding the platforms to account through DSA, DMA, you name it. And we've been on the steering committee for the structural indicators for the code of practice that accompanies the DSA. So we've been deeply into the weeds on all sorts of these kind of regulatory processes. But we also see that that's a very long way to go, and that's not going to be easy. And we know, can we really still implement DSA if it's going to result in tariffs on wine and cars, wine from France and cars from Germany? So The other side is so important, and that is the side of demand. And that is our demand. Us, we citizens, why do we click on it? Why do we consume it? Why do we absorb it? Why do we allow it to take root in our heads? Why do we share it? And what can we do about that? And that's about resilience building. So we believe that there's really no time to lose in this sort of work. And so our resilience building work we've done at great scale. From what, sitting next to Becky, and Becky's saying all of these things, you can see that there's such a big body of expert consensus now on how to do this and what is effective and what is impactful. What is still lacking is scale, and this is what sets us slightly apart, that we're kind of really working at scale. So we've trained more than 600 journalists across Europe, and we literally do physical walk-in visits into more than 1,400 classrooms every year, and we're about to grow quite a bit more. We also do training for teachers, and this is what it looks like. We're best known for our work with children, even though we work a lot with teachers, and this is work that we do with children aged 10 to 15, for all the reasons that Becky listed. And although officially our target group are the children, our unofficial targets are the teachers. And this combination of target groups is really, really interesting. What the teachers tell us is that what worries them is about the online space is the addictive design, the potential for radicalization. They ask us to come in to stop the kids talking about Andrew Tate. The kids say they worry about chain letters, they worry about what to do about conspiracy theories, they worry about peer pressure, and they also worry about family pressure. And what the journalists do, the journalists work with them and give them very basic, practical tools for checking what they see online, and also checking in with themselves, checking in and understanding confirmation bias, that sort of thing. But they also talk about the profession of journalism and are very honest also about the failings of journalism, which to us, when we work with cognitive psychologists and trust indicators that are still being researched and understood, so that this kind of transparency and honesty that the journalists bring into their training as a really fundamental point of trust building. Very briefly also, just staying on this, the children react very positively to our work, and the teachers, and now I want to get onto the adults, the teachers do too. Very often the teachers invite us into their classroom, not because they're that interested or not because they love a journalist, but literally because they want a 90-minute break. Because being a teacher is very hard work, and often they'll say, thank God you're here, I'm just going to have a cup of coffee, ignore me, I'm sitting in the back of the room. And these are the teachers that come to us afterwards and say, why are all the kids on these platforms? What is clickbait? What is all of this about? Why did they fall for all of the fakes that you showed them? And what can I do? And that is the moment that we really want to harness, and that interest is what we really want to harness. So we've been working increasingly with teacher training communities. We work with Erasmus+, et cetera, because we see the teachers as absolutely essential multipliers. They really could, if we could unlock this potential, then we could really be getting somewhere. So what's really very, I hope, inspiring is that the teachers tell us just how interested they are in this, and they tell us specifically since the pandemic how much they believe this belongs into their own classroom, regardless of whether it's primary school or the politics lesson or art lesson, or we've been in the maths lessons, I don't think we've had PE yet, but never mind. We've been in all sorts of subject lessons. They tell us again and again, you can see there in the green, just how prevalent it is that teachers say, yes, this is important for the children to learn, for my children to learn, and it belongs into my classroom, my subject area. However, when you then ask them, well, how often do you talk to them about online polarization and the content, the problems with online content, etc., the picture is very, very different. So the green and the blue that you can see are the teachers who say they talk about this often and regularly, and the dark red and orange are those that say they talk about it rarely or never. And when we ask them why, they tell us across these different countries, the answers are always the same. They don't have time, they're not recognized for it, they don't get incentivized, they don't get rewarded for it, but also they feel very uncertain about how to talk about this world. They are aware that it is immediately risky, that they can get in trouble with the parents. They are also aware of, I don't know whether you know, but that one teacher a few years ago was killed by a parent for raising the issue of Charlie Hebdo. And these are things that are very live in their conscience. They also say that they don't know the space that their children inhabit and don't feel equipped. So I want to show you something. So are these the teachers or hold on a second. Yeah. So when we ask the teachers where they go online to inform themselves, they show us this, right? Then when we ask the children the exact same question, this is the answer that we get. And so if you see, wherever you see a line that's orange without the green next to it, this is where the kids are on their own. And you can also see that there's some lines where the teachers are, where the kids really are not. So this is really the generational divide, and this is what makes it so hard for adults. And I can talk about teachers, this is the empirical evidence, but I'm sure this also is true of other adults, not just teachers. This says an awful lot, and we work an awful lot with that. Also, by the way, to make the point that fact-checking isn't going to solve it, because if you can look at these different platforms, they are not platforms that can be moderated or content moderated or policed or cleaned up. We're not going to be able to delete what's wrong in this information sphere, because these are gaming platforms, TikTok, Twitch, Discord, Fortnite. These are the places where kids go for information, and it is not where the adults are. So what we really, we've been asked a little bit by Busra to come up with some recommendations as well. If we can bridge this, if we can harness the interests of the teachers and kind of get rid of this divide, the one that, make it more the green, fill in the green, then we really are winning. And what we say is needed for that is funding. It always comes down to money. Funding. We're talking about the MFF now, we're talking about the Democracy Shield. It is actually a good time to be talking about this, because if we can't do regulatory enforcement, then at least we can fund education, right? So this is the moment, and this is a moment to be very focused on it, and also not only to fund innovative projects, and innovation is always the buzzword here in Brussels. Everybody's always winning projects based on how innovative their project is. However, we know, we're sitting next to each other, we're saying the same words. We know what works. There is a way forward. What now needs to happen is we need to fund scalable projects. And I don't mean fund lie detectors. We're very well funded, but there's other organizations that could be funded for scaling. But that encouragement for scaling is still missing. The long-term project, the long-term funding, and the funding for doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, until there's been a whole generation that's been trained in this. We also say that this kind of training belongs not only into all classroom curricula, but also into all teacher training curricula, so that soon enough, all these teachers from all the subject areas will be able to talk about this from their own perspective. And that's it. And of course, continue enforcing DMA, DSA. Don't let the GDPR be rolled back. And that's it from me. Thank you so much.
And before opening the floor to the public, we are going to give the first introduction of the inputs also from Saman. Saman will present their ongoing work to develop a new methodology for disrupting influence operation, focusing on evidence collection to identify illegal activities and platform policy violations, and will present their initial framework and broader vision for the defending European democracy against such operations.
Hi. I'm going to start with a question. So before that, I'm Sam. I'm going to talk with you about a project that is very much ongoing, under heavy development. What I'm going to show you is already going to be changing in about a week after we had another 4 workshops with government agencies across Europe. So bear with us. But before I go into what this actually is, how many of you have ever seen an influence operation? Can you put your hand up? An attempt to manipulate the public, disinformation campaign, let's say. How many of you have seen it? Okay. How many knew what to do about it when you saw it? Well, yes. So, great. Alliance for Europe has, for a long time now, been working a lot on analyzing and understanding how disinformation campaigns, which we call influence operations, are working on a technical level and behavioral level. We focus on the manipulative behaviors and techniques being used by them. We attribute the actors behind them. We map out coordinated inauthentic behavior networks, so bot networks. We try to understand what platform vulnerabilities that these threat actors are using and what type of infrastructure is behind them that enables them. So we very much tie into the DSA as well when it comes to platform vulnerabilities. So, what enables them to penetrate into the public? And we have very much, the last 2 years, moved away from just talking about the issue to taking active measures to disrupt the operations that we see, to stop what we see. A couple of months ago, we got approached by a funder. We were asked to pitch a project, and we pitched what we thought might actually be something that hopefully will be useful to the community, which is to try to put these 2 years of experience, these 2 years of collaborating with God knows how many organizations, into a common methodology for how we can stop operations when we see them. We have divided the network, the framework into we managed to identify a few different components on how this can be done. On one side, we have direct engagement with social media platforms and service providers, meaning going directly to Meta, going directly to the hosting provider of the website, the domain provider, and so on, the bank even, and having them take action. Beyond that, when that very, very much usually does not work, going to regulators and utilizing European laws and domestic laws against the type of activities that we see. To do that, and in parallel with that, we also very closely work with government agencies who work on this topic, and we have, in several cases, been able to utilize public pressure campaigns to put pressure on the social media platforms to take action when government engagement, regulatory actions, and direct engagement did not work. With these different measures, that we call them, we have created a toolbox with step-by-step instructions on how to be able to stop specific types of influence operations. And I will give you a concrete example of how we have done this in the past. During the French elections, we identified what seemed to be a Wagner-affiliated influence operation, so a Russian mercenary-affiliated influence operation operated from the Sahel. They were posing as French Muslims, as African diaspora of France, patriots of France, liberals of France, creating Facebook pages, all of them, catering to these audiences, and while publishing unlabeled political ads, using Canadian dollars, US dollars, Polish zloty, to target the French elections with messages discrediting Ukraine and Macron. We went to the platforms, nothing happened. They were like, this is normal behavior. We don't see anything wrong with this. We went to the French government. They acknowledged reception, but we did not see any movement. We went to the Commission, who acknowledged reception, again indicated this is a matter of national competency. We were trying for a month to figure out how to get this dealt with. There was the European Parliament elections, the snap elections. It was really the time to do something here. And these pages were actually reaching real people. We were seeing older people interacting with these pages and actually, sharing their content and so on. It was a really serious case. So we called Politico. And we said, hey, we have had this investigation, we're about to publish it. Would you be interested in writing an article about it? And they went, yes. They called Meta and said, hey, in a few hours, we're going to publish an article. Do you have a comment? Meta went, we have not sure why this has not been dealt with. Oh no. And it took a couple of hours. Everything was gone. Even things that we had not told them about, that other researchers later came to us and told us that they had found in relation to the same operation. So we as researchers, what we're also trying to do with this is to really highlight that we as practitioners can face these threats. If we work together, if we understand the tools that we have, we can face it. So what we have created now is this framework that is divided into 3 different sections. One is prepare, a preparation phase, which is all the different actions that we can take as civil society to prepare evidence to be submitted either to the platforms, government, regulators, and so on, so that we can use to justify a disruption. The disruption phase, which is all about the different steps, the different components that we can take to be able to disrupt an operation, to be able to disrupt all the different components that build up an operation. Their cyber infrastructure, social media presence, the domains that they have, the banking infrastructure that's actually enabling them to do transfers, all of the different components. And if that fails, and this is a bit of an afterthought because we don't really have it in the project, but it was a relevant thing to add, if you fail to disrupt, how can you mitigate these effects? This is how the framework looks like. I hope it's visible in these very colorful colors. But it begins with information collection, documentation of the information. It provides you with a whole bunch of different measures for how to analyze the information that you have. So how do you analyze and prove that what you have is a bot network? How can you prove that what you have is a deep fake? So giving you a bunch of different analytical tools, templates, recommendations, even contacts to experts who specialize in this. Then you go into an assessment phase. Do you have enough evidence now to actually move into a disruption? From there, how do you disrupt the cyber infrastructure? How do you use platform official channels to be able to have the platforms do something? How can you use different financial actions? So how can you approach banks? How can you approach payment providers and so on? Even ad networks to have them stop financially enabling the operation? How can you take regulatory actions utilizing the DSA, out-of-court settlement bodies, trusted flaggers, Article 34, 35? How can you use all of these different DSA measures, sanctions, defamation, and so on? I'm happy to send this, by the way, if anyone can't see it. And so on and so forth. And then what type of government agencies exist? And how can you collaborate with these different types of governments? And lastly, how can you utilize public pressure through media, through politicians, through advocacy groups, even activist groups? And lastly, different communication measures like pre-bunking, like footwork, as we call it, actually going out to classrooms and so on, to be able to inoculate the population against operations when they are being, when we can't stop them. It's not just a framework. This, we hope, would enable a whole of Europe approach for how to be able to stand up against these threats. At the moment, we're localizing this framework into the national context of 4 countries. And we're saying that if you are a non-government actor and you find an influence operation, and we have identified 4 types, which are the most common at the moment, 6 types, which are the most common. And we say, if you find a coordinated inauthentic behavior network, a deep fake, sextortion, for example, or what we saw on Grok, for example, if you see something like this, if you see sanction circumvention, impersonation, and so on, what steps do you take within these countries? What stakeholders exist who specialize in these different steps? What mandates exist within the government? What legislations exist? And a whole bunch of different contact points that you can use. If we can get funding for this, we hope to be able to operationalize this into a proper task force structure where across these different countries, across all the member states, there are working groups that can, whenever there's an operation, rapidly deploy and respond to a threat. At the moment, we also already have a European network in place of over 400 experts and 96 organizations who are all of them working on doing this type of research. What this network then can do is to complement these national task forces with expertise that do not exist within the countries, and enabling basically a NATO of the defense of democracy. Just some really quick stats on the network. If you want to join, you're welcome to. I won't go into it too much, but we're very focused on disruption, very focused on informing policymakers. We have had a big impact on the Democracy Shield, for example, so on and so forth. And we worked a lot with the DSA team. And that's it, thank you. If you want to add me on LinkedIn or join the network or receive our reports and alerts, feel free to scan the QR codes.
To the first contribution to all panelists. We have exactly 30 minutes for the contribution of the audience. I encourage you to come up with a question, but also I encourage panelists to respond to the contribution provided by the colleagues here. Anyone wants to take the, to break the ice in this event? Please, at the end, but make sure that you have a microphone and you speak loudly.
Yes, is this okay? Perfect. Thank you so much for this panel. It was really insightful. I have a question specifically pertaining to the political background in which a lot of these policy discussions take place. I think a lot of the examples that we hear commonly about the rise of Trump, Brexit, but also the problem of Andrew Tate, they happen against a specific backdrop of the rise of conservative movements and specific right-wing politics. And I was wondering, from your perspective of doing this work, to what extent we can approach this problem as kind of an apolitical one, or something that does not have to deal with certain ideological fractures that are also happening probably on a higher political level. So I was wondering how you deal with those kind of political sensitivities that are often underlying these approaches as well. Thank you.
I can say something. I must warn you all that I'm hard of hearing and I'm having some trouble hearing the question. So please forgive me if I'm not answering it in as precise a way as you would like. But if I understood it correctly, your question was how do we do our work in the context of a rightward shift in the general political landscape? Thank you. That's a really great question. So we make a real point. We've really designed our work to be politically neutral. We work with such simple examples, they're about the animal Olympics, deep fakes or AI fakes that are about dogs doing somersaults in the air. It's incredibly simple. So a lot of it is jokes. A lot of it's we don't talk, particularly with children aged 10, but even with the teenagers, we don't immediately go out and talk about, religious tolerance or migration, policies and things like that, simply because we know how much trouble we can leave the teacher in when we leave the classroom. And so we have found that we can use these very simple examples to get to very profound truths about what an earlier speaker was saying about using raising emotions, manipulating emotions, etc. You don't have to use political examples to talk about something that is deeply political and deeply about democracy. In fact, if you want to work with young people, and therefore with teachers, by the way, you're very well, you're very well placed. There's a lot there that you can do. Also, we have to keep saying again and again to the teachers, we're never going to tell your children what to think, ever. And believe me, we get a lot of teachers saying, can you give us a list of credible sources, please? And all of our journalists have been drilled to say no, no, because it's not, never, we have got to absolutely stay away from that. It's hard sometimes because the impulse is there, you know, the instinct is there to, as you say, to be defensive of your own truth, right? But instead we've got to just focus on to be radically fact-based, and that's actually a radical proposition these days. Stick to the facts. Here's how you find them. Thank you.
I find this question very difficult to answer because my job is to respond to attacks on charities and trade unions and other social impact organisations, and it is very often it's coming from the far right. So, for example, the National Trust in the UK was subject to a lot of criticism about having woke scones because they used vegan butter, and they wrote a report about the colonial history of a lot of their artefacts. The RNLI being told that they're a taxi service for immigrants. You know, I could go on. And so for me, it is political. And so a few weeks ago, before Christmas, I went to a conference that was organised by a far-right think tank. So I go and I'm a fully transparent. I'm a signed-up card-carrying member of the Labour Party in the UK, but I go and hang out in these spaces because I want to learn what they're saying and I want to understand the narratives that they're using. And being in a room surrounded by 100 people who hate everything that you stand for was really disconcerting. But the narratives they were coming out with were also really scary. They talked a lot about democracy, but only for white Christian people. You know, so for me, this is completely political. If we're talking about online extremism and disinformation, it's so sorry, I can't answer your question. Apologies.
I mean, I can maybe provide a very different angle on the institutional side. I think a lot of questions were asked to us in the last year of how we could, if we were sacrificing any of our enforcement because of like fear of retaliation from countries like the US. And I think what we stand on is, well, the law, and the law is the law and has to be implemented as such, but also it's a legislation that was approved and had to go through all the steps of European legislation. So that means the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council, and that is representative of all the governments in all the member states, and the Parliament has a variety of political views. So if something gets through the Parliament and the Council, that means that there is quite a wide, broad approval of what's in it. So we also stand on something that was bipartisan, and that's how it came into force. And now, as in the implementation and enforcement, luckily there are some specific provisions that were taken to ensure that we would be independent in this enforcement. So, for example, in the member states, the digital service coordinators are the authorities in the member states that enforce the DSA, and those have to be independent from the government. And in some member states, the procedure of designating this authority is taking quite long because it is hard to find an independent authority, but it is a requirement because this cannot be in the hands of whatever government is in place at the moment. So that is also how we try to future-proof the enforcement. But of course, there are always pressures, but we really do believe that we are just implementing the law regardless of what the political climate is.
It's an interesting question, I think. I mean, for us, like for our organization, it hasn't been too big of a challenge, as we focus on analyzing manipulative behaviors, manipulative techniques. We're a very technical organization in that sense. And then, you know, are you going to argue that a bot farm is a legitimate type of speech? So we even had a few really strange moments while in the European Parliament. I think a while back we were speaking, and we had an AfD politician come and like praise us. That was really, really strange. Like we're politically neutral and so on and so forth, of course, but you know, then her colleague was slandering us the day, you know, after on her podcast. But yeah, so that has really been our approach, that we're apolitical. We focus on the technical and, you know, legal aspects of what we see, and then we try to address the underlying systemic issues that enable these operations. But what does happen every now and again is that we get questioned by a bunch of conspiracy theorists that we're part of the deep states, that we are, controlling and monitoring European citizens, and we have this and that, but that's reaching a couple of hundred people at most. It's so fringe. It doesn't really matter. And then, you will have the Russians every now and again publishing something. Or recently, I think the Viktor Orban think tank that's here in Brussels wrote something about us. But what are they going to do? I mean, yeah, just going to be annoying.
Thank you very much for the contribution. Please, can you bring the microphone to...
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Ivana Jankowska, and I work for the Research Executive Agency, and it's my big pleasure to be here today because indeed SMICH has been part from my portfolio, and I've been following the project, at least in the last year, which is a bit sad that the project is ending soon. But I kind of get why this panel is the last panel for this meeting, because it ends on such a positive note. I mean, I had very positive vibes back here from what you were discussing on how you can counter or ideas on how we can counter the narratives and how we can teach the future generation, and that it's never too late to actually start learning and improving. And I also, from this conference, in a way also get one additional thing which was super important, in how the partners or, different nations can learn from each other, how researchers were comparing countries and how they learn and extract very similar patterns that could help, think futuristically, and and this is a very good transition towards the last panel, which is with the next steps. But I wanted to say that I don't want this to end with a full stop, but actually I wanted to say that this positive note should continue even after exiting this door, because there will be a lot more projects. I mean, the European Commission is working very hard on this issue, and as the colleague Anna was already presenting on the acts, but from our side we are working on many different projects and many different calls that will target very similar, democracy and AI engagement and digital citizenship, that they still, and citizens' political engagement that stay at the core of our interest in the following years to come. So this is not actually any full stop or end of the panel or end of the project, but actually should continue. So I really encourage, this very interesting ideas that we're adding up on each other that could actually be a one potential partnership, and something that could, I could really see it replicating in other countries, because it's so sad to see it happening only in Brussels. The idea is great. So yeah, that was, it was not a question, it was rather an idea and a positive impulse to be sent further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Many compliments for this panel, and I want to share some negative vibes, and I've got a specific question for Juliane and for Saman, but also for the other speakers. With the University of Milan and with my research center, we participated to the preparatory works for the last European legislation, especially Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Acts. We worked on amendments, we contributed also to some part of these norms. And I remember at those days the enthusiasm and the positive vibes, European Union preparing a legal framework to control platforms. Now, in these 2 years, also with my researchers, we are taking a look to the enforcement of these norms. In Italy, we've got only 3 trusted flaggers, 2 started last year and 1 in January. 2 for child pornography and revenge porn, and 1 for copyright issues, but no one is interested in disinformation, misinformation, and hate. And then I watched the Trump presentation of his presidency with all the powers, all the big powers of the platforms, and the idea that they are above the law. So, which is, we've got a very negative feeling about the part of the enforcement of these norms, and I would like to know your feelings and your also practical approach, because the idea is that it's a time, especially 2026, where you cannot dialogue with platforms, that all the activities from European Union, especially enforcement and fines, are not considered. And so the idea that it's a great work of norms in theory, but you know, and as a lawyer, for me is more important the enforcement, of course, than the norms. So I would like to know your feelings about this. Thank you.
I'll try and I'll make a first go, but then. So that's a really good question. We think about that as well, right? So we're quite pessimistic about the capacity of regulation to do very much. And what so these are just some, could talk about this for many hours, right? But I'll just give you a couple of ideas. So we see a lot of engagement at the intergovernmental level. UNESCO, OECD, the European institutions, everybody agrees that something must be done, right? And then at grassroots level, all of us sitting on this panel, and you, and all the teachers, and the kids, and the other CSOs, and blah, 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 we all agree. And what's missing is engagement in the middle, right? Now, national governments might have trouble sticking their neck out at the moment because you get whacked by tariffs, right? But there's a lot that can be done at subnational level. And so a lot of work that we do, and we're talking to UNESCO about mill cities, is really talking, and the Committee of the Regions and all sorts of places where you can get quite a lot done without getting so visible that you get whacked by the White House, and that's a real threat, right? I'm joking, but it's not a laughing matter, right? But there is something that can be done at regional, local, municipal, and city level. These are the places that have got money, by the way, to implement scalable things, but we need to connect them. At the moment, there are quite a few initiatives happening, but they're lacking coordination. And at the moment, what's also lacking, and I was so pleased to hear about the commitment for funding, by the way, by the previous, by the lady in the back. But at the moment, we need to make it a sellable proposition to the people with the money. At the moment, it's only a risk. Anything that it goes against the platforms or kind of tries to, tackle this is a risk. And what we need to show them, we need to do more work. This gets too granular, I'm so sorry, but we think about this a lot. We need to really measure the impact. We can't keep assuming that defending democracy, creating resilience, creating media literate society and a resilient society should be done just because it's good. You can't keep saying that. You actually have to make it a cost-benefit analysis that will sell to the mayor or the regional authority or maybe the national government, so that they fork out the money for these sort of things. It can't keep happening at intergovernmental level. It's not enough. You need the one thing that we have, and so therefore, by the way, there's a very abbreviated way of saying we need more research on behavioral impact. We need to be able to say this amount of euros affects this amount of change over this amount of time, so that we can make a proper business proposition for the people who are going to put our kind of resilience building in place. And then finally, I'm so sorry, I don't want to hog this space, but the one problem that we have is that at the political level, you ask any room of Stratcom people, right, who's selling their political party, you say to them, do you agree that the profit-based algorithms are harmful to democracy? Yes. Do you believe that they splinter society? Yes. Do you believe that they wreck social cohesion and our togetherness and actual intrinsic humanity? Yes. And then, okay, well, which one of you is going to give up this amazing tool to know your customer and absolutely direct your advertising, right? Who's going to give that up first? And there's no answer to that, because no one's going to do it. And that's where we're stumped. That's where we go to the subnational level. Sorry to talk so much.
I want to make a point about the DSA, and you're a lawyer, which I think is a very good thing for this point. We're in the Commission, and Europe is going up against social media platforms which have more budget than some countries. These companies have more lawyers than we in civil society have people. This legislation has not yet been tested. There has not yet been a praxis in place. When we have a legal practice in place, enforcement will, of course, be much easier. But until then, I applaud the Commission for their cautiousness, and I'm really, really impressed to see how they handled the first fines put in place against X, because it was brilliant, completely not content-based, purely behavioral, purely structural, brilliant move. So I would not lose hope on the DSA. It is an incredibly strong but slow legal tool that we have at our disposal. And I would like to actually mirror what was said here by Juliane? Yes, sorry. Because I think what we really do lack is coordination. Truly, we lack coordination. We have the Democracy Shield now, which is great. That, in a way, will hopefully coordinate what we do on an EU level. But we really need to break the silos of, at the moment, if you just look at how it works in the EU, you have different departments working on DSA, which it should be, that's actually the only fine thing, but you have different departments working on fact-checking, different departments working on journalism, others working on counter-FEMI and Stratcom, education, and so on. These things are being funded and developed very much in silos, is my impression. And we don't really have a concrete plan for how to save democracy from these authoritarian forces. So what we need on a European level is a work program, a full work program for how to defend democracy. And on a national level, we also need work programs where how do we combine the work of media literacy and digital literacy and the type of work that Lie Detector does with the type of work that we do. If we can bridge all of this type of work, if we can bridge legal enforcement, have lawyers, OSINT, educators, journalists, fact-checkers, policy experts, cybersecurity experts working together, then maybe we stand a chance against the multi-billion companies, against the massive countries now. We have the US now, let's be honest about it. The US is potentially to be seen as a threat actor against European interests. We cannot continue like we're doing and expect to win against this. We need to change, and I think this might be the way to do so.
Maybe I'll just bring that point home for me. I think of course, there's an expectation that we'll make quick progress and quick wins on the DSA. A reason why, we still took only 2 years to close a case with a fine, so I will still deem that a success compared to how long antitrust cases take at European level. But what is important to understand, and Sam had mentioned it, because there is no precedent, we want to make sure that we set a precedent that is in our favor. And taking legal risks also opens ourselves to the risk of losing a case. And the moment that the first case that we bring to an end is a loss, that puts us kind of in a place where it's really hard to get out of. So at least at the beginning, what we want to ensure is that we set proper procedures, that we set proper legal precedents, so that we can then, as we go forward on enforcement, move faster. But because indeed the players we're up against have rooms of lawyers that will look at every word that we say. I think yesterday our no compliance decision against X was published by the US government in quite a questionable issue of confidentiality. I think that really shows that all our words are being scrutinized. So the carefulness that we're taking at the moment is to ensure that we set a positive precedent and then build on it in the future.
I'd like to make the case for more support for civil society, because they're completely overwhelmed. Their service users, the communities, the individuals that they exist to support are overwhelmed from the cost of living crisis. They're also subject to all of the disinformation and online extremism we've been talking about today. Charities and NGOs are also targeted by disinformation actors and hostile actors, and they don't know how to respond to it, which doesn't help and then can result in this information being communicated even further. So I think if there was more support for charities and NGOs, particularly around training in this kind of thing, I think that would go a really long way to helping it. Because then they can also then communicate that back out to their service users, their donors, their volunteers, basically members of broader society. So it feels like a kind of an easy win.
We had another question from Sandra.
So when I work at the university I work at, every year I supervise research projects by postgraduate students, and every year I get students that say, I want to do something that's meaningful, I want to do research that contributes, and then I speak to colleagues in NGOs and civil society organizations who say, we don't have the resources to do research. And I'm always thinking, why can we not, or how can we bridge that gap? Because I feel like there's an untapped potential there, because it is a requirement of my students to do a research project. They have super rigorous research methods training, and they want to do something meaningful. And so it ends up being that I have to try to figure out ways to connect them with people. And I don't even know half of the civil society organizations that exist. So I love hearing what you're doing, and I always get this frustration of how can we marry the two up? How can we give you the resources we have, but also give the students an insight into what it's like to do research that's meaningful and impactful, because most of them don't want academic careers, rightly so, afterwards. So any thoughts on how we do that? Because I'm very keen to do that, and not just for myself, but for others that I know share similar frustrations.
Send them in my direction. So one of the services that we offer is we do media and political discourse analysis and then translate the results from that into actionable strategies that charities and trade unions can use. And it's really time and resource intensive for us to do. So if we could find some students who wanted to help us with it, we'd be thrilled to have them as part of the team.
Same here. We've got data coming out of our ears. Like, we collect GDPR compliant data from kids. We get feedback in real time from the kids, and we're desperate to work with academics and researchers on this. But it's hard, right? Because right now we're doing a scientific study with the University of Southern Denmark's Digital Democracy Center and LMU in Munich, where we're doing a proper scientific study on the behavioral impact of the behavioral change impact of the work that we do, to have exactly that, this much money results in this much impact. And it takes ages, because you've got to work with teachers, you've got to work with minors, and it's really hard, it's heavy lifting. We can do it because we've got such very strong contacts with such a very large community of teachers who believe in it and will help us make it happen. But it's really difficult. And at the moment, we just don't see that much interest in it from a funding point of view. We don't see, that many calls. We keep looking out for them because it's expensive and it takes a while. But I agree, it's enormously important. There was something else I had to say, but I've forgotten. I might remember later.
We have entered into last 3-4 minutes of the event. If you have a short question, and I will ask a very short answer to close up the event. I know that it's a bit late, so I don't want to keep you after 5 o'clock.
Can I just reply to this question? Because I think it's... Yeah, because the network that we have built, the theory of change of it, is that every stakeholder has a role within the ecosystem. So we have the fact checkers, we have the educators, we have all of these different people. And if we can utilize their strengths to support each other, that is the ideal scenario. So I think definitely if you have academics who want to work on this type of things, we have a lot of data, a lot of findings, and a lot of theoretical need we just don't have time to do. And they are then put to practice by a large community of practitioners. So feel free to send them our way, because we have so much that we never have time to look into and to develop, which is very academic work. And we have a few academics, and we're putting them very much to work. I recently connected one of them with a journal in NATO to explore how FIMI as a concept came about. And we're connecting them with government officials in the EU who were part of that. So, you know, this type of things are worth gold for us.
I think with influencers and with any type of communications, you need to be thinking about your audience and who is it that you want to reach and who are the voices that they're most likely to pay attention to, and then targeting it very specifically like that. Just as an aside, sort of linked to this, I was at an event last night with Maurice Katz, who was the lead campaigner on the New York Mayor Mandami's campaign, and he was talking about how they targeted everybody. Even though he's a progressive Democrat, they even spoke to Trump supporters and they ran ads on Fox News. But everything was really micro-targeted, so they had one message, but they would tailor it very specifically to the audience. And I think that's absolutely relevant with all of this that we've been talking about today as well.
So I thank everyone that stayed to the last minute of the event, and everyone have been very much focused on the discussion that we had. I would be happy to last this panel for another hour and a half, but I think that we would still have a lot of questions to and which would remain unanswered, and we hope that our work that we are doing as researchers and as organization in general keep on transforming into policies and also into action, because that is the goal of the projects that we are being involved in, the missions that we are having as a research community in general. Thank you very much for staying to the end of this panel, and I give the floor to the organizers if they have to say anything in the end.
As we come to the conclusion of the conference, I would like to thank you all for your engagement, thoughtful contributions, and active participation throughout the day. Over the course of today's sessions, we have explored the invisible middle from multiple perspectives: research, media, and policy. And we have examined evidence on how online extremism and misinformation intersect with the digital practices of middle-aged adults. And we have discussed why this demographic group deserves greater visibility in both research and response strategies. The discussions have reinforced a key message: evidence alone is not enough. Translating research into meaningful action requires collaboration across sectors, clear policy pathways, and a shared commitment to inclusive and preventive approaches. As we have heard in the reflection from Smith's partners, the project has contributed valuable knowledge, tools, and perspective over the past 3 years. While the Smith project is reaching an important milestone today, the issues it addresses remain highly relevant and ongoing. And as Ivana said before, we hope that today's conference serves not as a conclusion, but as a point of departure, encouraging continued dialogue, collaboration, and integration of these findings into future initiatives, policies, and practices. So I would like to thank you all the speakers, moderators, project partners, and participants for their contributions, as well as everyone involved in organizing and supporting today's event. So thank you once again for being part of this conversation. Thank you.